August 22nd, 1911. A painter named Louis Barraud walks into the Louvre's Salon Carré, sets up his easel, and looks up at a wall. The Mona Lisa isn't there. Not moved, not on loan, gone. It would take hours before anyone truly grasped what had happened. But here's what makes this theft extraordinary. Before that empty wall, the Mona Lisa wasn't particularly famous. Most Parisians couldn't have picked it out of a lineup. The heist that followed didn't just remove a painting from a museum, it created the most recognizable artwork on Earth. On that morning, the gap on the Salon Carré wall between Correggio's mystical marriage and Titian's allegory held only 4 bare iron pegs. Barraud, hoping to sketch the gallery, questioned a guard about the missing portrait. The guard shrugged. Louvre policy at the time allowed official photographers to remove artworks for documentation without scheduling or logging the move. It was assumed the painting was merely upstairs in the studio. Barraud waited. By afternoon, the wall remained blank. When museum staff sent a messenger upstairs to check, the photographers confirmed they had not touched the canvas. The discovery triggered a sluggish, disorganized panic. The Louvre was ordered closed, and a frantic, localized search began. Guards examined storage closets, service stairwells, and even trash bins, but the security sweep was hopelessly late. It had been more than 24 hours since the thief had walked out the front gates, and the museum's weak immediate response had given the culprit a massive head start. Before August 1911, the portrait of Lisa Gherardini was far from a global phenomenon. It was respected by art historians and admired by a small circle of Renaissance enthusiasts. But the general public paid it little attention. Major travel guides of the era barely mentioned the painting, and French daily newspapers averaged fewer than 5 references to it per year. Most visitors to the Louvre passed by the portrait on their way to see grander, more celebrated works like the Venus de Milo or Winged Victory. The heist changed everything, transforming a quiet portrait into an overnight international sensation. Newspapers quickly seized on the security failure, plastering the empty wall space across front pages worldwide. French dailies like Le Figaro, Le Matin, and Le Petit Parisien led a media storm that would produce more than 150 front-page articles over the next 3 years. The story crossed the Atlantic, with American newspapers running detailed reports on what they called the most colossal theft of modern times. This massive press campaign created a bizarre new phenomenon, the celebrity of absence. When the Louvre reopened to the public a week after the theft, thousands of people who had never expressed interest in the painting queued outside. An estimated 120,000 visitors filed through the Salon Carré during the first few days, drawn specifically to gaze at the 4 bare iron pegs in the dust-rimmed void where the canvas had once hung. People bought postcards of the empty space, left flowers, and wrote poems to the missing portrait. By disappearing, the painting achieved a level of public fascination that centuries on display had failed to secure. The search for a suspect eventually turned toward the people who built the museum's physical defenses. Among them was Vincenzo Peruggia, a 30-year-old Italian immigrant living in a modest Parisian flat. Peruggia was a carpenter and glazier, far removed from the world of high society art theft. In 1910, the Louvre hired a local firm to secure its most valuable paintings against vandalism. Peruggia was one of the laborers assigned to the project. Day after day, he worked inside the Salon Carré, cutting wood, fitting glass, and mounting protective cases around the masterpieces, including the portrait of Lisa Gherardini. This routine manual labor gave Peruggia something far more useful than an appreciation for Renaissance art: an intimate, highly practical knowledge of the museum's layout. He learned which doors remained unlocked, when the guards changed shifts, and exactly how the heavy wooden frames hung from their iron pegs. After the disappearance, Peruggia's true motives would become a subject of intense debate, suspended between patriotic duty and simple opportunism. He would later claim a desire to return a stolen masterpiece to its Italian homeland, correcting what he believed was Napoleon's historical plundering of his country's heritage. Others saw a struggling migrant worker who recognized an unsecured treasure and a potential financial windfall. But before any trial or public defense, Perugia was simply a quiet craftsman who possessed a worker's white smock, a set of tools, and a precise map of the building in his mind. On Sunday afternoon, August 20th, 1911, Vincenzo Perugia entered the Louvre like any other visitor. He did not buy a ticket to admire the art, but to find a place to hide. As the museum prepared to close for its weekly Monday maintenance day, Perugia slipped into a small, dark storage closet near the salon car. He shut the door and waited. He spent the night in the dark, surrounded by spare lumber and cleaning supplies. Outside his closet, the vast galleries fell silent, patrolled only by a skeletal night watch. Perugia remained motionless for hours, listening to the echoing footsteps of the guards as they made their rounds. At dawn on Monday, August 21st, 1911, the museum began to wake up. Maintenance crews, cleaners, and contractors arrived, all dressed in the standard uniform of the Louvre, loose, white canvas smocks. Perugia stepped out of the closet and put on his own white smock, blending instantly into the morning bustle. No one questioned his presence. He looked like any other day laborer. Around 7 o'clock, Perugia walked into the empty salon carre. The room was quiet. He stepped up to the portrait of Lisa Gherardini, reached up, and unhooked the wooden panel from its 4 heavy iron pegs. It took only a few seconds. He carried the framed masterpiece toward a nearby service staircase, a quiet exit route he had identified during his months working as a glazier. In the seclusion of the stairwell, Perugia set the painting down. He removed the heavy protective glass case, the very security enclosure he had helped install the year before. Using his fingers and a small tool, he quickly pried the poplar wood panel from its ornate gold frame. He left the glass and the empty frame discarded on the stone steps. Perugia took the bare wooden panel, which measured just 30 by 21 inches, and wrapped it tightly inside his white smock. He tucked the bundle under his arm. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he encountered an unexpected obstacle. The exit door was locked. Working quickly, he used a screwdriver from his pocket to remove the doorknob, but the lock remained stubborn. Just then, a museum plumber named Sauvé walked down the hall. Rather than raising an alarm, Sauvé assumed Perugia was a fellow workman locked out by a faulty door and used his own key to open it. Perugia walked past the main guard post. The watchman on duty had momentarily left his desk to fetch a bucket of water. Perugia stepped through the outer gates and onto the quiet Parisian street. He boarded a passing omnibus and disappeared into the city. The entire heist, from the moment he unhooked the painting to his escape onto the pavement, had taken less than 60 minutes. The empty wall of the salon car quickly became a monument to national embarrassment. As weeks turned into months without a single viable lead, the French public's initial amusement turned to anger. Newspapers openly mocked the authorities, printing caricatures of guards asleep on duty. This relentless criticism forced the prefect of police, Georges Muller-Michelet, to resign under intense pressure on December 12, 1911. Desperate to show progress, investigators cast a wide net, eventually targeting the Parisian avant-garde. In September 1911, police arrested the poet Guillaume Apollinaire, holding him in a prison cell for 5 days. They also detained and questioned his close associate, a young Spanish painter named Pablo Picasso, who wept openly during his interrogation. Both men were caught up in the dragnet because a mutual acquaintance, a petty thief named Honoré Gary Pierret, had previously stolen small Iberian stone statues from the museum and sold them to Picasso. While both artists were eventually cleared of any connection to the missing painting, their high-profile arrests provided the press with a sensational distraction from the state's continued failure. Yet the ultimate irony of the search lay in its geography. While French authorities monitored train stations, searched outgoing ships, and interrogated artists, the actual culprit had not fled the country. Vincenzo Peruggia had carried the wood panel to his modest room at 5 Rue de la Goutte d'Or, a boarding house located a mere 800 meters from the Louvre. The masterpiece spent the next 2 years tucked inside a wooden trunk with a false bottom, right under the noses of the investigators. For 28 months, the world's most sought-after artwork sat in a small room close enough to the museum to hear the daily toll of its bells. In late autumn of 1913, the silence surrounding the stolen masterpiece broke not through a brilliant police breakthrough, but through an act of mundane commercial ambition. An antiquarian dealer in Florence named Alfredo Geri received a letter signed by a mysterious Leonard V. The writer claimed to possess the Mona Lisa, expressing a desire to return the painting to its Italian homeland in exchange for a modest payment. Geri, cautious but curious, contacted the director of the Uffizi Gallery and arranged a meeting with the seller at the Hotel Tripoli Italia in Florence. When they arrived, the quiet craftsman revealed the wood panel hidden beneath a false bottom in a travel trunk right under a pile of dirty laundry. Once the experts verified the work's authenticity, Florentine police arrested Vincenzo Peruggia on the spot. The arrest exposed a glaring failure in early forensic science. 2 years earlier, Parisian investigators had recovered a clear fingerprint from the discarded glass case on the Louvre's service staircase. The print belonged to a left hand. Although Peruggia had a prior arrest record in Paris, French police records of the era only indexed the right hands of criminals. Because his left-hand print was not on file, the match went completely undetected, allowing the thief to live undisturbed just a short walk from the museum. The recovery of the painting instantly stripped the heist of its grand, mysterious aura. French investigators had spent 2 years chasing complex conspiracies, monitoring railway stations, and interrogating avant-garde artists. In reality, the security apparatus of France had been defeated by a simple glazier who kept his quiet prize in a cheap boarding house until his own signature on a letter finally brought his anonymity to an end. In June 1914, Vincenzo Peruggia stood trial in Florence, charged with the aggravated theft of cultural property. Inside the courtroom of the Palazzo Vecchio, the prosecution presented a clear-cut case. But Peruggia offered a different defense, painting himself not as a common criminal, but as an Italian patriot who had simply returned Leonardo's masterpiece to its rightful home. The Italian public, swept up in nationalist fervor, eagerly embraced this narrative. To them, Peruggia was a hero who had righted a historical wrong, even if his history was famously flawed. On July 31st, the court found him guilty, handing down a sentence of 1 year and 15 days. Yet Peruggia would serve only 7 months. With the outbreak of the First World War, a timely decree reduced his sentence, and he walked free. The legal system had pronounced him guilty, but across Italy, he was celebrated as a champion of national pride. In the eyes of his countrymen, the man who had stolen the world's most famous smile had done so not for personal gain, but for the honor of Italy. Before returning to France, the Italian government organized a national farewell tour. The portrait went on display at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, before traveling to Rome and Milan. Enormous, packed crowds gathered at every stop, eager to see the work that had dominated global news for more than 2 years. Special trains transported the canvas under armed guard, and thousands of people waited on platforms just to watch the carriages pass. On January 4th, 1914, the painting officially arrived back in Paris. The reinstallation ceremony at the Louvre was treated with the gravity of a state homecoming, with French officials declaring it the resurrection of art. Returned to the salon car behind a new protective iron grille, the portrait was secured under tighter measures, but its relationship with the public had changed forever. The empty space on the wall had done what centuries of quiet exhibition could not. It had turned an admired Renaissance portrait into a global celebrity. Before the theft, the painting was rarely mentioned in popular travel guides and averaged fewer than 5 newspaper references a year. Today, the Louvre attracts over 9 million visitors annually, and studies show that the vast majority visit the museum specifically to see this single work. While art historians continue to debate the subtle qualities of Leonardo's brushwork, the primary driver of its modern status remains the empty wall of 1911. The theft did not destroy the masterpiece. Instead, it created the icon. Today, millions queue for a fleeting glance of the world's most famous face. Yet, they are not merely admiring Da Vinci's brushwork. They are participating in a modern ritual of celebrity born of a theft. The irony remains. We only truly learned to look at her once she was gone. What do you think of her legendary status? Let us know in the comments.